Welcome to the deep dive. We take complex sources, unpack them, and get you right to the core ideas.
And today we're digging into, well, a real cornerstone of physics education. The Feynman Lectures on Physics, Volume 3, specifically Chapter 12.
That's right. This chapter dives deep into something called hyperfine splitting in the hydrogen atom. Sounds technical, I know.
It is a bit, but it's a fantastic example of quantum mechanics in action. We're looking at how this tiny magnetic dance between the electron and the proton dictates the structure of hydrogen's most basic energy state.
Yeah, and when we say tiny, we really mean it. The energy shift we're talking about is about 10 millionths of an electron volt, so like 10 to 6 eV. It's incredibly small compared to the main energy levels.
It is, but the beauty here and what Feynman highlights so well is how quantum mechanics, specifically using spin operators, lets us calculate this effect with really astonishing precision. We're ignoring the electron's orbit for this problem, focusing purely on spin.
Okay, so our goal for this deep dive: follow Feynman's path. We'll lay out the basic setup, figure out the rules for this magnetic interaction, find the natural energy states, and then see what happens if we, turn on an external magnet.
We'll try to make the physics and the concepts really clear, describing things visually, as Feynman often does, even without having the book right in front of you.
All right, let's jump into section 1, the setup.
Yeah.
We've got the simplest atom, hydrogen, in its ground state.
So one proton in the middle, one electron doing its thing.
Mm-hmm.
But crucially, as we said, we're ignoring the orbital motion. We're laser focused on the fact that both the electron and the proton have spin.
They're both spin 1/2 particles, right? Which means they act like tiny magnets.
Exactly. And in the quantum world, these tiny magnets can basically only point up or down relative to some chosen direction.
So if you have two of these spin magnets, the electron E and the proton P, how many ways can they arrange themselves?
Well, you've got four possibilities, right? Four basic independent configurations. These are our base states.
Okay, let's list them out. We could have electron spin up, proton spin up.
Yep, that's state one. We can write it like plus wrangle.
Then electron up, proton down, state 2, plus wrangle right.
Then the reverse, electron down, proton down, state 3, wrangle plus wrangle.
And finally, both down, electron down, proton down, state 4, wrangle eigle.
And that's the complete set.
Yeah.
Any possible spin state of this ground state hydrogen atom, no matter how complicated it seems, can actually be described as just a mix of these four fundamental states.
Like the alphabet for this particular quantum problem, everything else is built from these letters.
Precisely. That foundation is key.
Okay, foundation laid. Now, section 2. How do these states actually relate to energy? We need the quantum rulebook, the Hamiltonian.
Exactly. The Hamiltonian Haftele tells us the energy of the system. Now, here's the clever part Feynman walks through. The atom is just floating in space, no external fields yet. So it looks the same no matter how you rotate it.
It's rotationally invariant. Okay, why does that matter for the energy interaction?
Because it dramatically simplifies things. If the total energy can't depend on the overall orientation in space, then the interaction energy between the electron and proton spin can only depend on their orientation relative to each other.
Ah, I see. It doesn't matter if both point north or east or whatever, just how they point compared to one another. Like, are they aligned, anti-aligned, somewhere in between?
You got it. And the mathematical way quantum mechanics expresses that relative alignment energy for two spins is through the scalar product, the dot product of their spin operators. So Hatsigme?
Okay, so the Hamiltonian isn't some super complex thing then.
Nope. It boils down to this. Each $E plus A. $E is just the main ground state energy we usually think about, the part we're ignoring the details of. And ATSEG is this constant that measures the strength of this magnetic spin coupling. It depends on their magnetic moments and how far apart they are, essentially.
So LDIO tells us how much energy it costs for the spins to be aligned in different ways.
Exactly. Now, you plug this Hamiltonian into the Schrödinger equation, you solve it, and you're looking for the stationary states, those specific combinations of our four base states that have a single definite energy.
And what comes out? Do we get 4 different energy levels corresponding to the 4 base states?
That's what you might initially guess, but no. The solution is actually simpler and quite elegant. You find 4 stationary states, yes, but they group into only 2 distinct energy levels.
That's devils, okay.
3 of the states end up having the exact same energy, a shift of oil, relative to $E. These are called the triplet states.
Triplet, okay. 3 states sharing 1 energy. What about the 4th one?
The 4th state sits all by itself at a lower energy level. Its shift is oil netted to 3 NEOIL, and that's called the singlet state.
So higher energy triplet, 3 states at EL, lower energy singlet, one state at 8 needle low, and the singlet is lower. Does that mean it's more stable?
Generally, lower energy means more stable, yes. You can sort of think of the singlet state as the electron and proton spins being mostly anti-parallel, sort of canceling each other's magnetic field out, which is a lower energy configuration. The triplet states correspond more to the spins being aligned.
Okay, so this tiny energy gap between the triplet and singlet states, that's the hyperfine splitting. The difference is 1 minus 3a ago, which is 4 Ehlers.
That's the gap. Delta E equals 4A.
But like we said, E is tiny, so 4 Ehlers is also tiny. Why is this small energy gap, 4 Ehlers, such a big deal?
Well, this is where it gets really fascinating and connects to the wider universe. When a hydrogen atom is in the slightly higher energy triplet state, it can spontaneously drop down to the lower energy singlet state.
And when it drops, it has to release that energy difference, 4 Ehlers.
Precisely. It releases it by emitting a photon, a particle of light, and the frequency of that light is directly related to the energy difference by Planck's constant, delta EH, or no H4AH.
Okay, so we can calculate this frequency?
We can calculate it with incredible accuracy using the quantum mechanics we just outlined. And the frequency comes out to be 1,420,405,751.8 Hz cycles per second.
Wow, that's specific. And does that number mean anything?
It means everything to radio astronomers. That frequency corresponds to a radio wave with a wavelength of about 21 centimeters. This is the famous 21-centimeter hydrogen line.
The one they used to map hydrogen gas in space.
The very same. This is one of the most important tools in astronomy. Because hydrogen is everywhere, this 21-centimeter signal lets us see where the cold, neutral hydrogen gas is, how it's moving, how galaxies are structured, all thanks to this tiny 4-Dal energy gap predicted by the spin interaction.
That's actually amazing. A quantum calculation about 2 tiny spins gives us a ruler for the cosmos.
It's a triumph of theoretical physics, matched perfectly by observation.
Okay, mine's slightly blown. But Feynman doesn't stop there. Section 3. What if we introduce an external magnetic field, $? The Zeeman effect.
Right. Now we complicate the picture. We take our hydrogen atom with its internal dollar interaction causing the split, and we put it in a uniform magnetic field, $.
So our rulebook, the Hamiltonian, needs updating.
It does. We still have the $E base energy, and we still have the internal dollar term. But now we add 2 new terms. One describes how the electron's magnetic moment interacts with the external field, $, and the other describes how the proton's magnetic moment interacts with $.
So it's like the electron and proton are now being pulled by the internal interaction and by this big external magnet $.
Exactly.
There
3
are.
players in the energy calculation now. And solving the equations gets, well, mathematically more involved. But Feynman focuses on the results, what happens to the energy levels.
And what does happen? We started with 2 levels, the triplet at $1 and the singlet at $3, when the dollars was 0.
Right. Now, as you gradually turn up the magnetic field by $, those 2 levels split further. The single triplet level at Bayer actually splits into 3 separate levels, and the single level at $3 also shifts. So you end up with 4 distinct energy levels when by $, is non-zero.
4 levels now. And how do they behave as $$ gets stronger? Is it simple?
Not entirely, and this is a key point. If you picture that energy diagram, Feynman shows energy on the vertical axis, magnetic field by $, on the horizontal dollar. You see 4 lines emerging from the 2 points at by $.
Okay, I'm visualizing it.
2 of those lines, corresponding to states Feynman labels I and IV, they change energy pretty much linearly with by $. Straight lines, basically.
That sounds simple enough. Electron-proton aligning or anti-aligning with the field, maybe.
Roughly, yes. But the other 2 states, states 2 and 3, the ones in the middle energy-wise, their lines are curved, especially when by $, is small or moderate. They only start to look like straight lines when the magnetic field $, becomes very, very strong.
Curved lines. Why? What does that curvature mean physically?
It means there's a competition going on. When $d is weak, the internal spin coupling, the dollar term, is still a significant player. It's trying to keep the states in their original triplet singlet configurations. The external field $, is trying to force the electron and proton spins to align with it.
So the curvature shows the messy transition region where neither interaction is fully dominating. The states are complicated mixtures, fighting between aligning with each other or aligning with the external field.
That's a great way to put it. The internal glue is resisting the external pull. The curved energy levels reflect that complex interplay.
So what happens when the external field $, wins? Section 4, the high field limit.
Right. When $, gets very large, technically, when the energy associated with the external field, like B$ is much larger than the internal coupling energy a dollar, the external field completely dominates.
The internal glue dollars basically becomes negligible.
Pretty much. It's still there, but it's a small correction.
Yeah.
In this high field limit, the picture simplifies a lot. The four energy states essentially stop being those complicated mixtures.
And they become...
They become states that are primarily defined by whether the electron spin is up or down relative to the strong external field ball or dollars,
Yeah.
and whether the proton spin is up or down relative to ball or dollar. The states kind of snap into alignment with the dominant external force.
So at high field, the energies are just what you'd expect from placing two independent magnets, electron and proton, in a strong field, plus a tiny tweak from the Auto-Lie interaction.
That's basically it. The energies E2 and IAED3 become much simpler functions of Balalar, mostly linear again, reflecting those up-down combinations relative to the field.
And Feynman wraps up by mentioning tools like projection matrices.
Yeah, section 12-6 briefly touches on the mathematics of changing basis states using projection operators. It's a standard quantum mechanics technique useful for, say, relating these energy states back to what you'd measure if you pass these atoms through something like a Stern-Gerlach apparatus, which separates based on spin orientation. It's about connecting different descriptions of the same system. Got it. Okay, let's recap this whole journey. We started with hydrogen's ground state, just thinking about electron and proton spin.
Yeah, define the four base states, up, 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 down, down, up, down, down.
Then we use rotational invariance to argue the interaction energy depends on their relative alignment. Had to get known Hess-sigma, Hess-sig.
Which led us to the hyperfine splitting the triplet states at energy dollars and the singlet state at energy $3.
And crucially, that tiny energy difference, $4, gives rise to the 21-centimeter radio line, essential for astronomy.
Absolutely. Then we turn on an external magnetic field, the dollar.
Which caused the Zeeman effect, those two levels split into four.
And we saw that interesting curved behavior at low fields, showing the competition between the internal dollar interaction and the external dollar field, before simplifying again at very high fields.
It really is a beautiful illustration of quantum principles at work. It really is. What always strikes me is how this very subtle thing, the magnetic interaction between two spins inside an atom, produces such a precise, measurable, and frankly cosmically important result like the 21-centimeter line. It shows how these fundamental quantum rules underpin everything.
And the precision is just staggering, isn't it? That frequency measured to parts per trillion. It's not just a theory. It connects the quantum realm to the scale of galaxies with incredible accuracy.
Makes you wonder, doesn't it?
How so?
Well, think about it. If this one, relatively weak internal interaction, has such a profound and measurable effect on the universe that we can see, what other, perhaps even more subtle quantum interactions might be shaping reality in ways we haven't figured out how to measure yet? What else is hiding in the structure of fundamental particles?
That's definitely something to ponder. A great place to leave it for today. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Feynman's Chapter 12.
Hope it helps you unlock a bit more of the universe.